Hello, I'm Frank Caruso, producer of Oregon Life. In this week's episode, we visit Oregon's Historical Museum. And if you haven't been there, you should go there. Let me tell you, the volunteers are amazing. The items in the Historical Museum, when I have gone several times through the years, you discover new things every time you go. Even if you just walk through an area, you see something different every time. It's an amazing place with amazing people. I hope you enjoy this episode, as I did, talking to our volunteers.
I'm Joanne Swenson. I'm here today to give you a brief overview of the beginnings of the Oregon Area Historical Society. And I start by saying it all started with Ida Lumley, who stood on the opposite side of North Main Street and watched the demise of the old blacksmith shop, and thought to herself, there goes a piece of Oregon's history that will never exist again. That night she went home and had dinner with her mother and was recounting the events of the day and how it kind of depressed her that this piece of Oregon was being destroyed and probably forgotten very soon. Her mother looked at her and simply said, well, why don't you do something about it? And so she did. She started out by going over to the Oregon Observer office, talking with Butler Delaney. Came out with a promise from him that he would support her with articles in the newspaper and so forth if she wanted to get a historical society. From there, it went to her making a number of phone calls to some of her friends, Joan Wethel and Faye Schneider and Flores Paulson. And the next thing you know, the excitement kind of grew in the Oregon area, and more people became interested in having an Oregon Area Historical Society. With that, she went to Tom McKay, who was the head of the state of Wisconsin Historical Society. And with that, they were able to get bylaws written and an organizational plan to start the Oregon Area Historical Society. A meeting was called on September 9th, 1987. 16 people showed up to show interest, and it continued on from there. Bylaws were adopted on November 18th of 1987, and an interim board of directors was elected. The board consisted of R. Maxwell Gaffke, Kimberly Hart, Mary Hochschild, Dorothy Larson, Ida Lumley, Gerald Neath, Flores Paulson, Faye Schneider, and Joan Wethel. The Oregon Area Historical Society became a reality and was incorporated on January 13th, 1988. The charter was actually signed in March of 1988. At the first meeting, Ida Lumley was elected as president and Flores Paulson was the vice president. They did a number of events during that year. They got off to a good start, having an old-fashioned picnic in the park, an entry in the Summerfest parade. They did bake sales at the shopping center on the north end during Penny's Days. They undertook writing an Old Settlers Cookbook and published a newsletter. But their prevailing ambition and goal was to have a museum. But of course, money was a problem. There was this old run-down building on West Lincoln Street that was available. It was priced in the range of $30,000 to $35,000. Reasonable enough, but still, this newly formed historical society would need to come up with some serious fundraising to do that. Then Flores Paulson stepped forward. She offered to purchase the building and donate it to the Oregon Area Historical Society in honor of her parents and her grandparents, the Paulson family and the Hainan families. We have early pictures and records of what the building looked like when they first purchased it. It wasn't very good. I often wondered if they even looked inside, because that wasn't very good either. But it didn't deter these hardy, purpose-driven people. There was an opportunity to have a museum, and they were determined that it was going to happen. So we had a lot of volunteers from the community, people with carpenter skills, plumbing skills, electrical skills, and they all came forward and helped make this into the museum it is today. We had a team that called themselves the Wrecking Crew, because literally a lot of it did have to be demolished before it could be rebuilt into a usable site. They called themselves the Wrecking Crew, and it was headed by Bob Keenan, who lived right next door. Solicited the help of Stan Gaffke, Wes Wethel, and Max Gaffke, spearhead of that group of people, of volunteers that worked on the museum. I like to call it the miracle on West Lincoln Street because it truly was. If you look at the pictures of the before and the after, the transformation was nothing but remarkable. After years of hard work, the grand opening took place on October 3rd, 1992. The dedication ceremonies were held as part of Oregon's sesquicentennial events, even though work on the building was still a little bit short of being done. The village president, Bill Court, was there, Miss Oregon, Tina Gaffke, and Lyman Anderson was the keynote address. I'd like to quote from the speech that Florence Paulson gave at that time, saying, "This building that rose in about 1909 over the ashes of the Oregon Hotel became a farmer's co-op and later a lumber storage area and was just waiting for us. My family, for 147 years, not only tried to give back to the community, but they also received their spiritual guidance, their education, and many received much of our livelihood in this area. I know in my heart and soul that giving this building for a lasting reminder of our past would be what my family would want me to do." Bob and Janet Keenan lived next door, and they became a couple who were the mainstays of this museum over the years. Bob, having worked on it and remodeled it, knew every inch of this building, and he continued to be the primary caretaker of the building for several years. Janet, on the other hand, was the person who became the museum coordinator, bringing in objects and artifacts and cataloging them, making displays and so forth. She was instrumental in getting the loaning closet established and up and running. Melanie Woodworth came to the organization at one of the quarterly meetings. And as the meeting progressed, she waited until the president asked if there was new business. And with that, she stood up and said, "Yes, I have a few ideas I'd like to share and have the Historical Society consider." They were very good ideas. Ideas like getting a website started and for ways that we could become more visible within the community, working with other civic organizations, the school, the nursing home, and various other entities throughout the village. Janet had the misfortune of a fall and was not able to continue on as museum coordinator as she'd done for many years. It was then that Melanie stepped up and took that position and held it until just recently when she and her husband Doug decided that they wanted to move to Cincinnati so that they could be close to their family. She was responsible for many projects, including the book project and many other projects and events that was held throughout the years for the Historical Society. That is just a small part of Oregon's history. We have been in existence for 35 years. I enjoy being a volunteer at the Oregon Area Historical Society. I write the quarterly newsletters, and I like to meet the people that come into the museum. I find their stories are what makes this a living museum, and I can find out what their relationship to Oregon has been, who their relatives were, and many times I even knew about those people. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a volunteer at the Oregon Area Historical Society. I've been here about 5 years, and I think one of the real gems to the museum is this lower level. When you come down the stairs, you find yourself in a 1910 kitchen. All the things that your great-grandma or great-great-grandma had to do to get a meal on the table and get the clothes washed. Continuing on, you'll see that we have a small sports area telling about the history of sports in Oregon. Unfortunately, this is not well developed. We'd really like to bring this into the present time with a lot more sports people involved. We've had people like Shaka Smart and Lisa Stone go on to do big things. We've had kids go to college and be sports and go pro in sports. We'd really like to make this a better area. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you volunteer to bring our sports collection up to date. Moving on, we have a nice room here with the history of the presence of our soldiers in the wars. We start with Nathaniel Ames, who was a Revolutionary War veteran that came to Oregon. And then we move on. Charlie Netherwood, I think you all know him. He was a Civil War veteran who was wounded in the war, but came to Oregon and walked to Madison on his birthday every year till he was 92. You'll see back here we have a great honor roll for the Second World War. We have a lot of people on this wall, but really I'd love to bring this wall into many more panels and get everyone else that was in the war or saw any action in Oregon. Right now we have sort of a bit of a space crunch, so we can't get that in, but someday we will. And in the meantime, we have all of our veterans in a binder upstairs if you have any questions about any of them. As we come around the room, there's a lot more notables from Oregon. Ernie Tesh, who was the pilot for General Eisenhower. And then over on this wall, we have the women of the service that did a lot of stuff. It wasn't just the guys around here, it was everybody that helped us keep our freedom.
Hello, my name is Joel Olson, and I'm a volunteer researcher at the Oregon Area Historical Society Museum. One of the things people will see immediately upon coming into the museum is all the exhibits. We have 2 floors of exhibits, but there's other things that happen in a museum. There's a lot of research that goes on, and it is available to the public as well. A couple of things that are unique to the Oregon Historical Society is we have the Oregon Observer from several years back. I have opened up for you the 100th anniversary booklet. It's Thursday, August 3rd, 1922. And we do some excerpting from this newspaper and have a historical timeline printed in the current Observer. So we have the Observer back several years. If somebody were interested in doing research themselves, they could come and we'd pull the volumes for them and they can do that kind of research. Another thing that we have is probably a really important function is we have some family files, and I'm just holding up the file of Florice Paulson. I know that we've heard about her already in this presentation. Just extensive material available. It's hard to pull it all out for you just right now, but we have 5 file drawers of information on local families, if they were prominent settlers, if they were business people, teachers, whatever. And if you're doing some research on a family, we invite the public to come into the museum. You can sit at this table that I'm sitting at right here, do some research. We'll pull the family files for you, and you can discover what we have that may be useful if you're doing genealogical work or whatever. Another thing that we have that people have found useful is a very extensive obituary file. I don't have any of those out here. Our ring binders are rather extensive, but I do have a file drawer of cemetery files, cemetery burials. We have both of the 2 cemeteries in town and several of the outstanding outlying cemeteries out in the township around. And so people have again come in and they've been able to verify burial information of family and friends. We have church files. We have the 4 primary churches in town, and that's a growing file of the smaller churches as well. We have a good run of the high school annuals, the yearbooks. People come in sometimes and check one of those out for the information that they're looking for. We also have a research library that's in the process of being organized. A lot of books have come in that are useful for history. Dane County, state of Wisconsin. We have some on local authors and local artists. And we're trying to bring that up to a usable format for people as well. We have one very interesting file. We have really several interesting ones. This one may be of interest to people. Here's our file of all the murders that have happened in Oregon, and I think there's 6 or 7 tabs here of murders. A couple of them have been documented, one in this book that is available here at the library as well. People think life in Oregon is pretty easygoing, and it is, but we've had our share of some scandal as well, and we have that information available in research. So these are the kinds of materials that we have available. Public is welcome anytime to come in, and we're glad to share the files and help people do some research into both the exciting years of Oregon as well as the good life that the community is offering to people now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heather. I am a volunteer here at the Oregon Area Historical Society. My main job is researching the old buildings and historic homes in our wonderful village. If you have a question about any of your homes or any of the buildings in town, I'm your girl. I have an entire resource of binders and files on many of the homes and buildings in our village and outside of our village. The reason I started volunteering at the Historical Society was because I was interested in some of the old homes that I see. I love the architecture, the colors. I want to know the history of all of these buildings. And even though I didn't grow up here, I still want to know the history. History has always drawn me in. So I figured since I was living here, I should know more about the history, so I joined the Historical Society. The Oregon Area Historical Society is located on Lincoln Street, and this is part of our historic district, the Lincoln Street Historical District, actually. We have 5 houses on this street, with one on Main Street that's part of this district. Starting next to the Historical Society is the Allgard House. It was built in 1890. Following down that was the Rose House, which was built in 1894. Then across the street is the Palmer House. It was built in 1879. Then the Warner House, which was built in 1871. And the Gilbert House in 1870. Next to the Gilbert House on Main Street is another Gilbert House that was built in 1906. One of the things that I like about the Historical Society is the many pieces of clothing that we have here. We constantly are changing out our mannequins. Right now we're featuring prom season and spring in different eras of dress. We have like the 20s with our beige dress here, 60s and 70s with our very colorful dress, turn of the century, purple is fun for spring, and hats, lots of hats. The Historical Society is not only a place to come and research history or see artifacts from our past. You can also come and try on some outfits. If you have something specific in mind, we might have it. We have a lot of clothes, and we have an attic full of them. So come on down and try on an outfit. Bye.